Hello, everybody. My name is Doug Draper. I'm a 1992 graduate from the University of Kansas, and this is On the Banks. As we've said before, On the Banks literally is one of the only fraternity podcasts where we bring brothers in, we share stories, and talk about the values of the fraternity of Phi Gamma Delta. So I'm incredibly excited about the guests that we have on, and I'll do a quick intro of our guest, but it's an amazing journey, and I'm so excited to have Paul on our show. So today we're sitting down with Paul Sams. He's a man whose story is has equal parts timing and grit and brotherhood. And if you've ever wondered how the values of the fraternity um, really form into a successful career, this is what it's all about. So, Paul Sams, UC Santa Barbara, 1992. Welcome to On the Banks. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks, Doug. It's good to do this with you.
Good, 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 good. Well, we always like to kind of have these shows go in some cadence, and we always want to start at the beginning. Now, I'm not talking about the beginning when you were a kid. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but really, it's always interesting to see why our brothers decided to join our organization. And the one thing unique that I want you to speak on is that you just didn't come in and take a baton and managing an existing chapter. You literally were a founding father and started things from scratch, which is absolutely amazing. So my initial question, Paul, is like, why? Why did you want to jump into this thing and start become a founding father and create everything from a baseline of zero?
Well, it was not part of my plan, that's for sure. When I got to UCSB, I transferred in as a junior, and my then girlfriend was encouraging me to be in a fraternity. And
Mhm.
in all candor, I was not excited about the idea of it. I went through Rush in the fall and upon my arrival, and honestly, really wasn't feeling it. And I said to her, I just don't think it's for me. Soon thereafter, um, I heard about Phi Gamma Delta. They had a table at the university center, and they said, they were having a group potentially started on the campus, and I decided to chat with them. It was Bob Bainey and another gentleman there that was involved, and I started having conversations with them, and I don't know, it for some reason at that time, and I don't know if I could pinpoint what it was.
Yeah.
It felt right, and it caused me to rethink my views on being in a fraternity, and I decided that it was something that I was interested in. I ended up getting a bid from them and ended up being part of the Gamma Chi Delta colony, and it was a great experience.
Yeah, that's. I was a field secretary for the fraternity and actually visited UC Santa Barbara back in the like 93 or 94, something like that. So our paths probably didn't cross, but was always impressed. And that campus and the brothers there were pretty amazing. So you had a great foundation. So what was one thing that was most surprising to you as you got into this, right? So you met Bob Bainey at this table. And you said, "Hey, I'm raising my hand. I'm into this thing." And when you started creating, right, not necessarily managing, but creating, what was the one thing that struck to you like, wow, this is not what I expected, or wow, this was really cool and I'm glad this is what I expected. So I don't know if that question makes sense, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit.
It was definitely more than I expected. I didn't understand the true meaning of brotherhood, and I didn't have, a huge amount of experience and knowledge at that point in leadership and building something. And I
Hmm.
think the combination of the relationships I built, and some that are lifelong friendships to this day, those kind of brought us all together, those friendships. And then, as we started thinking about building a chapter and, or becoming a chapter, quite candidly, we were a colony for a while. There was a lot of things you have to do to go from being a colony to a chapter. And we we really had to go through a lot of different challenges and what have you, and it taught a lot, gave us a lot of grit, I think, and it really provided us an opportunity to create something special. We wanted to be the top chapter in all of Phi Gamma Delta. We had views on how we wanted to position ourselves on the campus and amongst the other fraternities and sororities, and how we wanted to impact the community. We had very big views, and I think all of those things um, helped to shape kind of who I was, because later in life um, was involved in doing a lot of building as well. It kind of served as a real foundation for me in that regard, from the perspective of how to work hard, how to build a plan, how to execute, how to lead a lot of people, and definitely got a lot of those learnings and experiences with Fiji while I was at Santa Barbara.
Nice. Well, one of the words that you use, which I love, is grit, right? As far as that goes. And one of the reasons that you're on the show today is to talk about your successes in the gaming industry, right? But you didn't necessarily go from leading and creating a colony right into the gaming business. You kind of got into the software, kind of gaming. You
Mhm.
talked about a really unique story about how that pivot happened and some of the connections and a classmate that you were involved with. So talk about that. Hey, I'm going from my fraternity and college career to my professional career. Talk about that little transition story.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I transferred into UCSB as a junior, and so I didn't really know a lot of folks. My best friend from high school, my girlfriend from high school, and a couple of other friends had all gone to UCSB, and so I
Mhm.
had a small group of people. Um, but I got into different classes, and I was in a business writing course. There was like 300 people in it, and there was a group project that was announced by the professor the first day. And she said, you need to group up with X number of people, and you're going to be working on this project throughout the quarter. And so, everybody's looking around, they're connecting with their friends. I don't really know anybody in the class. And so, a couple of people that were right near me that I'm guessing had similar experiences, we all said, you want to do this together? And we said, okay. Well, it turned out that there was a woman named Ingrid Bohm that was in the group, and she was a returning student. She was basically coming back to do her last couple classes. She had left many years before, and so she and I really hit it off. She was the owner of a company locally near UCSB, and they did educational software. It was a company called Intellimation, and they also had a company called ABC Clio. And so that was involved in reference materials, one of the biggest reference material companies for libraries, actually. And so, anyway, we ended up hitting it off. We built an incredible presentation, won some awards with the Small Business Administration, had a lot of really cool kind of experiences together with her. And, we did a lot of work on our project at her company because they had all sorts of desktop publishing capabilities and what have you there. And so, that being said, end of the quarter, we went to all look at our grades. She had never not been first in her class, throughout all of her time at UCSB prior to that. And I remember standing in the hallway, looking for our student number and finding our grades. And she got beat for the first time, and it happened to be me. And
Love it.
so that being said, she ended up offering me a job to be a technical writing intern for them, because I had done a lot of the writing for the project that we did, and ended up getting there, doing that work, and they just kept giving me more and more opportunities, because each one that I would take on, I did really well for them. And so they started referring to me as the company firefighter. And what it did was it gave me an opportunity to experience pretty much all of the different departments within the company. The last year I was there or so, I ended up working for the CEO of the company, a guy named Ron Bohm. And he was an attorney, and he kind of took me under his wing and taught me how to draft agreements and what have you. And so what that did was it gave me the path to get to my next role. Being involved in managing all of their contracts and doing a lot of contract negotiations and writing of agreements under his guide. And so it was a great experience, and it prepared me a lot for what I would next encounter.
Yeah, cool. Well, the next encounter, I'll tell you what, that was catapulted into the stratosphere, right? Where you took that experience and then got involved with Blizzard Entertainment, right? And for those on the show who may not know that name, they certainly know some of the creations that your organization was part of. So before we get into a little bit more, tell us about Blizzard and how it is, I was going to say, one of the, if not the most iconic gaming companies in the world. So tell us about Blizzard and give us a hook so our listeners know exactly the foundations that you created in that world.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, that those experiences at Intellimation really helped propel me to get to that point to have opportunity at Blizzard. It was actually with Blizzard's parent company that I originally began my journey. When I joined a company called Davidson and Associates, they were an educational software company, and that's what the connection was with Intellimation, right? So I was able to transition and get an opportunity there. My very first week of work, they called me in and they said, "Hey, we're acquiring this small company called Silicon and Synapse," which later became Blizzard. And they said, "We want you to do all of the contractual and financial due diligence to acquire this small company." They're a video game developer. They won, Independent Game Developer of the Year this last year. They had a couple of Game of the Year titles that they did for Interplay, and they're really cool. I'm looking forward to meet them and to help us do this due diligence, kind of the final checkbox of due diligence necessary to close the deal. So I met the founders of Blizzard at that time, and we really hit it off, particularly with Alan Adham and Mike Morheim. And we ended up closing that deal. I took on a role initially as contract administrator, um, quickly was promoted to being the general manager of a joint venture that Davidson had with Simon and Schuster. Did that for a short period of time, but all that time I was having conversations with the leadership at Blizzard, particularly Alan. And at some point, he told Bob Davidson, the CEO of Davidson and Associates, that he needed someone to run the business and focus on that so he could make the games. And Bob said, "Well, you need to talk to Paul." I was kind of Bob's protege of sorts, and
Mhm.
he and I had a great relationship built in trust and success. And I ended up sitting down and interviewing with the Blizzard folks officially to oversee business development, was the way it was positioned initially. And had some meetings with them. They offered me a job that day, and I ended up accepting and going down there. Now, originally, it was positioned as business development. That was to kind of appease Bob. Bob didn't want the title to be too big. He didn't want to create a whole new kind of infrastructure down there. They had their own kind of go-to-market folks, and they had all of their own business folks at Davidson. And so they really wanted somebody that could just handle day-to-day operations. That's the way he viewed it. Alan did not. And so I got there a couple days in, and he said, "Hey, he brought me up to his office. He opened up his filing cabinet. He says, 'Take all this stuff. I'm not going to deal with this anymore. You need to handle, all the day-to-day stuff, and you're not only going to be dealing with business, but all of the people issues and everything else.'" And just started laying out a bunch of the different things. And so basically, game development continued under him. The testing and what have you of the games and IT stayed under Mike Morheim. And then the rest of the responsibilities of the company on a day-to-day basis were handed to me. And really, when I joined, the company had launched Warcraft the prior year, and then Warcraft 2, and we were in the process of trying to ship Warcraft 2's expansion set, and we're working on Diablo and StarCraft at the time. And so, that all being said, my focus was to shield the developers from everything so they could focus solely on making the games. And that spanned every aspect of the business and dealing with the parent company and any partnerships we had and any business relationships. It was really initially all about that. And that was kind of my big thing was I wanted to make sure to shield them from all of the distractions so that their
Mhm.
sole focus could be on making the best games in the world. And that's what I think Blizzard became known for is building some of the most iconic franchises of all time between Warcraft, StarCraft, Diablo, Overwatch, World of Warcraft, Hearthstone. Some incredible franchises. And, it was it was it was an incredible experience. Even though I was not making the games, I was involved very much in play testing them and giving feedback. And it was everybody at Blizzard participated in that regard. And so, we were working insane hours. I remember when we launched Diablo, I, uh, I tested the game together with all the developers for like 36 hours straight, didn't leave the
Mhm.
office. And we just did what it took. And it reminds me, as I think about it, of, the Fiji founding at the colony founding for Phi Gamma Delta at UCSB. It was the same mentality. It was we knew we had to do whatever is necessary to achieve the goal. And for us, it was we wanted to be the top game company in the world. We wanted to be making the best games in the world. We wanted to ensure that every game we launched was game of the year, that it was the number one seller in the world. And so it was a level of focus and commitment and effort and grit that allowed that to happen. It was what we saw when we founded the Delta colony for Fiji at Santa Barbara. It was what I saw and was a part of as well at Blizzard, building something that started small, but had incredible people that did something incredible together. And we
Mhm.
over the years of being at Blizzard, where I was there around 20 years, we went through seven different acquisitions where we had that many different parent companies and had to learn a lot along the way and grew a lot along the way. We ended up building an entire kind of global organization, opened offices around the world, and started doing all of our own go-to-market, all of our own customer service, all of our own network operations for hosting all these big games, and all of that stuff over those years ended up being under my responsibility. Again, the separation of duties was game development was Alan or Mike, and then everything else ended up being under me. And I think it was a big part of Blizzard's success. First and foremost, the games were what drove it all, right? But um, in order to make sure those games reached a global audience and that we had the success that we did, it was the teams that I was involved in building, bringing those to market and how we positioned them and how we promoted them and how we interacted with our players, how we built, we're a major part of building the esports global industry with our
Mhm.
games because some of the biggest esports titles ever started from Blizzard. And so those were all things that were my responsibilities as well. So everything around the game, all of the interactions with the players, all of that kind of stuff were things that ultimately were responsibilities of mine or teams that I was responsible for. So it was an incredible run and one that I'm incredibly proud of because I
Mhm.
agree with you, as you mentioned, Blizzard is arguably one of the most iconic, well-known, most respected, and most beloved um, game developer and publishers in the world. And I can say that as aside from my kids, um, it is what I consider my greatest accomplishment. And obviously, I didn't do it by myself. I did it with a lot of incredible teammates and partners
Mhm.
and what have you. And but it was, man, it was an incredible experience
Mhm.
and one that I'll never forget. And honestly, I see Phi Gamma Delta and the experience that I had at UC Santa Barbara and that work that I told you about. Those were really foundational elements to helping me grow into the person that could take on the opportunity at Blizzard and flourish. You don't just do that. You have to have the right foundation, and Fiji was absolutely a huge part of the foundation for me to be able to achieve the things that I was able to there.
Yeah, that's great. You can hear the passion in your voice and the storytelling with that experience, as far as the pride that you have in the organization. So I have one question that we didn't talk about that I want to go back to, right? When you spoke about you were up for, and then we'll move forward. When you say you were like in the thick of the battle and you're up for 36 hours and you're testing the
Mhm.
games and there's
Yeah.
this craziness. So this is when you say that, this is what I envision. So tell me if I'm wrong or whatever, that you and your team are in one room, you're testing the game and you're like, hey, this glitched out. We need you to change this code. And they're in the other room changing it. And it's like real time and everybody's a little bit chaotic because you got to meet a deadline and everything else. Is that just my crazy mind, or is there any relevance to that story I just said to the reality of when you're up for 36 hours trying to meet deadlines?
Yeah, I mean, we were literally trying to gold master the game, and it was the 36 hours leading up to us actually saying we're done. And that's what we would you refer to as a gold master back when, discs were being pressed before
Mhm.
everything was digital and you would download things. I mean, obviously discs are still being pressed, but it's less common than it was then. It was at that time, that's all it was. And so we were trying to get that gold master, and in the process, we were play testing. We talked about how gameplay is first and foremost in making great Blizzard games. And so we were play testing it, making sure that, the remaining bugs that had been identified had been fixed, but also play testing and making sure that it was fun because games, there's a lot of very interesting games that are beautiful or really, incredible technical feats or what have you. But those aren't what really capture the hearts and minds of players. What captures the hearts and minds of players is is it fun and does it draw you in and does it create a suspension of disbelief such that you can really kind of immerse yourself and transport yourself somewhere else. And that was something that we always try to achieve. And so, going back to the question specifically, you know, I was in my office. There was no Ventrilo or other types of, ways to be able to speak with other players. But before all that happened, we were wanting to be able to communicate and have that social experience when we were playing the game. And so we were all on speakerphones in our various offices and desks. And so we would be playing and everybody's like screaming and yelling and having a good time and go here, go there, you know. It definitely was definitely chaotic, like you said, but also measured because, we knew we had a job to do and we had a goal that we were trying to achieve and we wanted to blow the minds of all the players out there. And so, it was while chaotic, we had a meticulous focus on perfection or being as close to it as possible. And so that's really what it was about. It was an intensity and focus on delivering something great, delivering it, with as few bugs as possible, right? Because nothing you ship is perfect, but we wanted it to be as close as possible. And then once we finished. We had that gold master. After 36 hours, everybody was dead, and I was like, we had to get the disc to our manufacturing leader, who was an hour away at our parent company. And so I actually took the disc and I said, I'll do it. And so on no sleep, I drove up, delivered the gold master, and then went a couple blocks away from that office to my grandparents' house and fell asleep and didn't wake up for like 30 hours. Um, and It was quite an experience, but definitely something that I'll never forget. We had a mentality of we have to do whatever is necessary to deliver greatness, and whether that was hours that we worked, or the other things that we did to ensure that our games were great, we just did it, and
Mm.
definitely. Really proud of what we did there. We had 17 number one hits in a row while I was there. Every game that we released from uh, 1994 until 2015 was named Game of the Year or Expansion of the Year or, genre title of the year. And so we had an incredible track record that I don't think will ever be matched in the history of the game industry. I used to say to people, imagine the greatest sports teams that you can think of that have won, tons of Super Bowls or tons of, NBA championships or Stanley Cups or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
Has any of them ever done it 17 times in a row? I think the answer is no. Even
Right.
my beloved Steelers, which I know that we're going to talk about, that have 6 Lombardi trophies, they've never done it. They've done it, they've gone back to back twice, but that's two in a row, right? You look at any of the big other storied uh, franchises out there in professional sports, it just isn't done. And so for Blizzard to be able to achieve that, it was a level of commitment and uh, a commitment to quality, which was on our values, and a focus on our global gaming community, and making sure that it was just fun that helped us deliver that. And again, it was an incredible group of people, an incredible period of time that we did incredible things together that I think changed the landscape of the game industry, particularly with World of Warcraft. I don't think that. I'm not sure there's been a larger impact on the game industry ever than that game.
Yeah. Well, that's an amazing story. Thanks for taking me back a little bit on that. And you touched on it a little bit. And Paul, when we started, I had this vision, not now, but when we first sat down and reached out to you to be a guest on the show.
Mhm.
It's kind of like with the fraternity, right? I had this mindset of here's how this conversation is going to go. And after you and I spoke, it's morphed into a totally different direction. Kind of like when you're doing recruitment at the fraternity, right? You may have a perception of somebody that you're talking to that might be a good choice for the chapter, and then you get to know them a little bit more, and the story and what you think was relevant is a little bit different, right? So my whole point is um, the conversation that I thought we were going to have initially when we first sat down, it migrated pretty quickly. And you spoke to it a little bit here just a second ago. So we started at the beginning of the show with your fraternity experience. Now we're going to rewind all the way to when you're 5 years old, because that story is awesome. I love it. And then we're going to talk about some more passion that you have in your life. So without further ado, you're 5 years old, you're in a home. Tell us that story of what the epiphany that you had in that moment related to sports.
Yeah, it really is a story of love at first sight. And I was actually 4 years old, and it was January of 1975, and I was visiting with my aunt and uncle. My parents had dropped me off while they were looking to go buy their first house, and none of my cousins happened to be there. I was so excited to go over, they weren't there, and so usually I would have been outside playing with them, but they weren't, and so I was bored, and I asked my aunt, "Hey, can I watch television?" I went into their family room and turned on the TV. Was standing in front of it, doing the old twist knob thing for
Oh
the
yeah.
channel. And I came across something on the screen that I wasn't familiar with. I didn't know what it was. Um, and but what I do know is that as I was standing there watching this, um, there was a bunch of men on this field, and they were playing a game, and the first play of what I later found out was football. The first play I ever saw was the passing touchdown, the one passing touchdown that Terry Bradshaw threw in the 1975 Super Bowl to Larry Brown against the Minnesota Vikings, which would be the first Super Bowl that the Steelers would ultimately win, and would be the start of one of the most kind of prolific Super Bowl runs in NFL history in the 1970s, where the Steelers won 4 Super Bowls. And so as I watched that game and I saw that first touchdown, the crowd was going crazy, and I was just completely mesmerized. I stood there, and I don't think I sat down or moved until the game was over. I just stood there, I think mouth agape, and just, you know, bright-eyed and watching this, just amazed. My parents were not into sports, so I really hadn't been exposed to them. Other than, I might have been playing something with friends outside or whatever, but I'd never watched a sporting event. So this was literally the first sporting event that I ever saw, and the first time I ever saw football. And thankfully, it was the Pittsburgh Steelers. Thankfully, we won that game, and what an exciting time for a little kid. You fall in love with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1975, and for the next number of years, you have bragging rights with your friends that are unmatched, right? Because the Steelers by January of 1980 had won four Super Bowls and had lost none. And so we were, it was early in the Super Bowl era, and nobody could match the Pittsburgh Steelers. By the way, I grew up and was living in Southern California, right? So this is a kid that is in Southern California. There's no connection to Pittsburgh at all, zero.
Right.
But it was Terry Bradshaw and those folks, the Steel Curtain, that just mesmerized me. And truly, I tell people all the time, when I think back on my life, the only thing that I can remember loving for longer than the Pittsburgh Steelers is my parents. And
Mm.
so it has been a lifelong love affair with that team. I love it. And you know, you can see I'm wearing it.
There you
I'm
go.
always representing.
Nice.
I wear if you go back and you look online at pictures while I was at Blizzard, you'll see that the entire time I was there, and even today, you have these security access little deals that you have. I had a Steelers lanyard I literally wore every single day with my badge on it. It is something I love, and it's something that I've been able to become more involved with over the years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know
Well,
that's one of your
yeah, that's
things.
awesome because I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. Everybody's like, hey, I'm passionate about the Denver Broncos or I'm passionate about the New England Patriots, right? But you had a way to kind of fuse that together. So I'm going to fast forward, right? We talked about Blizzard, then we talked about the passion that you have for the Steelers. And then on the exit strategy you had with Blizzard, I think it was in 2009, I think we spoke about, but you had an amazing opportunity to really take that passion to the next level. So talk to us about what happened there. Fast forward, I don't know how many years, but you were able to take it to the next level.
Yeah, so it's an interesting path. I continued to have this passion for the Steelers all those years, and I continue to do so to this day. But um, I was involved in a business deal at Blizzard. We were trying to build a motion picture. We wanted to do a movie about one of our game franchises, and we began trying to do that. And we spent a couple of years, me and a guy named Chris Metzen, spent a number of years going and pitching over and over to Hollywood, trying to get somebody to bite on wanting to make a game or a movie based on a video game franchise. And at the time, they had not really been successful. So it was a hard road. We ended up meeting a guy named John Jashney, who we later brought on as our kind of advisor and producer. And he introduced us to a guy named Thomas Tull. Why am I telling you all this? Because Thomas is a key piece of how the opportunity with the Steelers came about. So John brought the team from Legendary Pictures, which Thomas had founded and John had since joined as the CO, and brought him down to our office. And when he walked in, he saw that I was wearing that Steeler lanyard. And he was suspicious of it, but I didn't understand why. He thought, interestingly, that I was trying to butter him up to get him to sign us for a movie deal because he also was a Steelers fan. And he thought, why is this guy wearing the Steelers stuff? He couldn't imagine that it was another person with similar passion that was the same age as him that fell in love with the Pittsburgh Steelers on the same day.
Wow.
But on opposite sides of the country. He was in I think upstate New York, and I was in Southern California. And as little boys, we fell in love with the team the same day. We ended up hijacking this meeting and talking about the Steelers for an hour with all of the executives from his company and my company in this room. And they're all looking at each other like, are we serious? We're sitting here, we're supposed to be talking about this picture. Well, we built this fast friendship and connection. And then started talking about the actual movie opportunity. And he, at the end of it, we had built such a bond. He was like, let's do it. And so even though all of my colleagues were probably sitting there thinking, why are we talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers? What it did was it built this connection with him, which then um, opened a door and an opportunity. He and I started talking regularly. He called me one day and said, "Hey, do you want to go to Pittsburgh?" I was like, "Why? It's not the regular season." He said, "Well, I'm going to be screening We Are Marshall, the football movie with Matthew McConaughey for the team, and I wanted you to come." And so I said, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." So I did. We flew out there. We ended up meeting Coach Cower. We ended up meeting Dan and Art Rooney, as well as a number of other people in the organization, a ton of the players, and we had just an incredible time. And we were just two big kids. We had his wife was a professional photographer. She took pictures of us running out of the tunnel with our favorite jerseys on. I was wearing Bradshaw, he was wearing Jack Lambert. I mean, just big kids. And and so, we ended up going home and what have you. And then you fast forward and to 2009. And one morning I'd gotten to Blizzard and I had my ritual every morning. I'd get there, I'd go get a cup of tea, and I'd sit at my desk. And before I'd start work for 10 minutes, I'd go to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and I'd read about the Steelers. Well, that morning I saw that the Steelers ownership was going to be divesting a portion of the team for a variety of reasons, and that they were going to be looking for investors to come in and be part of that. I called Thomas and like on my cell, like immediately, and said, "Hey, did you see this? This is incredible." And I jokingly said to him, "I wonder if Art and Dan would consider us being investors." Ha ha ha. Well, he starts laughing at me, and I'm thinking to myself, pardon my language, mofo, why are you laughing at me? Come on. I mean, I agree it's far-fetched, but dude, why are you laughing at me? And he's laughing kind of uncontrollably. And I'm like, get kind of irritated. I'm like, dude, what are you laughing for? And he goes, "I'm just laughing because you and I were thinking the exact same thing." And he goes, "I already called Dan and Art and we're in." And I was like, "We're in? What?" He goes, "I already talked to him, and they've got to sit down and interview each of us. We got to go through a background check, and we have to, be able to come up with X amount of cash." And I said, "How much?" And he told me, and I was like, "Oh my God." And while it is not nearly as much as anybody would expect based on the costs associated with uh, NFL franchises these days, it was a amount of money for me at the time that was kind of like, oh my God, how could I even possibly do that? Well, what was also happening simultaneously was our then parent company, Vivendi, was in the process of acquiring Activision, which is the makers of Call of Duty. And they were going to merge Activision and Blizzard together to form Activision Blizzard, that was, then was going to be the goal was to be the number one video game company in the world. And so that was a triggering event, change of control triggering event, and all of my equity was going to vest. And if I sold a portion of it, I would be in a position where I could gain access to those dollars. And so timing, right? We talked a lot about grit earlier on to help, make some of the things happen that I was able to do in my career. But timing and knowing the right people is also a key piece of the puzzle. And that was definitely the case here, connecting with Thomas, who, helped me make that connection with the Steelers, but also timing that we were going to, all the work we had done at Blizzard and the value we'd created, that we were in a position to be able to be merged with Activision, and for that liquidity event essentially to happen for me, such that I would have access to capital to make the investment. And so in 2009, was able to do that, and Blizzard was the reason that that opportunity was ever able to happen for me. I wouldn't have met Thomas. I wouldn't have met Dan and Art Rooney. I wouldn't have been able to do it financially. I would have never imagined in a million years. Like when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, when I was an adult, there was never a moment where I thought, one day I'm going to be a minority investor or owner in the Pittsburgh Steelers. There was no scenario in which I thought that. And to have this opportunity was unbelievable. I remember, multiple times going to Pittsburgh. I remember the first time I went to Pittsburgh for a game, I literally was walking to the stadium and I had tears coming down my face. Like it's an emotional thing to me. And I can't explain why I care about it and why I love it so much. But to have that passion, that love, uh, then be able to move from a love and a passion to being able to have even a small involvement in that franchise has been, beyond my imagination. The Rooney family is one of the most respected families in probably all of professional sports, and those those people, Dan, who has since passed, and his son Art the second, they're the they're as good a people as you hear about being. They're just incredible. So to be involved in a franchise that has the storied history that it does, that is led by such incredible human beings, ethical, good human beings that have had such a huge impact on the NFL, and I can't begin to say how lucky and proud I feel to have
Mhm.
had the opportunity thus far to be involved. I'm not involved in like day-to-day operations. Don't get me wrong. I don't, and none of the investors that came in are really. You know, the Rooney family continues to run it, and rightly so. They have 6 Super Bowls. None of us do. So they know what they're doing. We're having the incredible opportunity to be involved, and to be able to see behind the curtain, to be able to stand on the sidelines before games and watch, our heroes warm up, to be at the sidelines during training camp and to see them, you know, uh, battling to get ready for the season, and to, interact with Coach Tomlin and hear, how he views things. It's just an incredible experience. And for me, when I was growing up, the Steeler players were my heroes. I'm 55 years old now. Most of these guys are half my age. And for some reason, anytime I get on the sideline, um, or at training camp or whatever, and I'm watching these guys, it's transportive to me, to my childhood. And even though I'm twice their age, they're still my heroes out there. And so it is an incredible experience, to be able to be involved. And in the event that or I shouldn't say in the event, when we win our next Super Bowl, probably, I'm not sure it'll be this year, but when we win our next Super Bowl, one of the other awesome benefits is that I'll get a Super Bowl ring, if when the time comes that we win another one. And so uh, it's been an incredible ride, and one that you know. I can't imagine, even now, I pinch myself. I can't imagine that I'm in the situation. Just, again, timing, luck, knowing the right people, and working really
Yeah.
hard to get in a position to be able to do it, when the opportunity came around.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, I mean, grit, timing, and passion. Obviously, the passion you had for Blizzard, and then obviously the joy. You may not know this, but you were kind of like business mode passion when you talked about Blizzard, and then you were just
Yeah.
like happy-go-lucky passion in the last 5 minutes and 10 minutes when we
Yeah.
talked about
Yeah.
the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is awesome. Yeah, timing, grit, timing, and a passion, and position yourself in the right spot at the right
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah.
that's great. Well, I'm going to flip it back to the fraternity as we wind down here.
Mhm.
The question that I wanted to pose you, right, because of your successes that we've spoken about with the professional, with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Blizzard. What Here's the deal: the Archons just called you, right, the governing body of the fraternity, and they need direction on what the fraternity is going to look like into the future, right? 26. And I'm not talking about next year, 26. I'm talking about, the vision that you had whenever you developed Blizzard. Um,
Right.
here, what does it need to look like in the future to stay relevant? And the fact that you have the vision with your gaming and you crushed it there, right? That's why the archons are coming to you. So they want your vision of what the fraternity looks like in the future. What do you tell them?
Focus on building strong, ethical leaders that do not ask others to do things that they're not willing to do themselves, to lead from the front. I think that leadership should be one of the biggest focuses because in order to have had the opportunity to do the things that I've done and to be able to achieve what I've achieved, it really I think goes back to leadership. And I learned that my first experiences with being a leader were in Phi Gamma Delta and being on the executive board of our colony and being the on the executive board when we actually received our charter at Ecclesia. And so leadership is the thing, right? You need to understand how you can lead people, how you can get a bunch of different people from a bunch of different backgrounds to have a shared vision, to have a shared goal and a shared commitment to do something incredible, to do something great. Um, there are leaders that are born for sure, but many are made. And if you have somebody that is born a leader that then is honed into an even better leader, then you have something really incredible. And so, obviously the fraternity building relationships and building these lifelong relationships is important, right? Because again, it's who you know, right? It's also timing and everything, but it's also, how you lead. If I would not have learned the things that I did at Phi Gamma Delta while I was at UCSB around leadership and how to lead those 48 founding fathers together with the other leaders, um, I'm not sure I would have been properly prepared to do the leading that I needed to do later at Blizzard and throughout the rest of my career. So that's where I would put huge focus. I would focus on building relationships and networking, and finding ways to work with and interact with other members of the fraternity, many of whom have had other incredible stories and incredible careers and lives. But that leadership piece for me is the key. You don't create greatness, great things. You don't achieve great things without great leaders helping to guide the path. And so that is something that I think I would put massive focus into because if we at Phi Gamma Delta can build these leaders of the future, we'll have members of our fraternity leading some of the biggest companies and biggest organizations in the future. And I think the values that our fraternity have are incredible, and they're admirable or admirable. And I think that it would be wonderful to see more of our brothers in those types of roles. And so let's prepare them to be leaders. Let's show them how to do it. And let's teach them and put them in positions to lead so that they can then lead in the future their families, they can lead their companies and lead their communities.
Perfect. Oh, I love that. I love that. Paul, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I enjoyed our conversation when we first met a couple of weeks ago, but I tell you what, your storytelling, you're weaving your successes with fraternity through your successes in your professional life and the amazing dream that you experienced with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I can't thank you enough for joining the show. This is exactly what we're trying to accomplish with On the Banks. And thank you so much for being a participant and letting us talk to you a little bit today.
Well, thanks for including me. It's always great to reconnect with Phi Gamma Delta and brothers that maybe I might not have had the opportunity of meeting before, like you. And so, definitely appreciate the opportunity, and definitely look forward to helping the fraternity go to that next level in the coming years.
Excellent. Excellent. And I also want to thank all of our listeners and our brothers out there. We really appreciate you tuning in to the series that we call On the Banks. We're going to continue to bring you these amazing stories from brothers all over the world. And until we talk next time, I just want to say I'm mighty proud to be a Fiji. Thanks for listening to On the Banks.